Hello, hello, Nitin. Hello, hello. Hello.
Hello, sir.
Yeah, okay, now.
Okay, sir.
Screen కనబడుతుందా?
కనిపిస్తుంది సార్.
Right. So mute your audio. So the previous class we have seen the fundamentals to C programming. Yes, we have learned what is syntax and semantics. What are two popular programming paradigms called procedure-oriented programming and object-oriented programming. Though we didn't discuss about object-oriented programming, but we just mentioned that there exists an object-oriented programming because you are a beginner and when you are learning C programming, so we cannot go to that extent of discussing object-oriented programming. First, let us confine ourselves to procedure-oriented programming. So, as I mentioned earlier, C programming or C language will follow procedure-oriented programming, and the main theme of your C program is a function. Without a function, we cannot write any code, and we call the function as a container for the code, container of code, right? And just like any any natural language that have grammar, a programming language will similarly have something called semantics and syntax. Syntax is a general form or a general structure how your program looks like and how to use a concept. And coming to semantics, it is nothing but a set of rules. So both these things are necessary to learn any programming language. Every programming language will have syntax and semantics. Now today we'll start learning the syntax and semantics of C programming from the beginning. Right. So basically, let me first explain you the structure of a C program. So when I say structure of a C program, it means that how a program looks like, what will be at the beginning and what will be at the ending, the middle, all these things what you find in your C program. That is nothing but a structure of a C program. Just like a human being has a structure, right? So whenever you look at a human being, you know that he is a human being. When you look at an animal, you can recognize by looking at its structure what it is, whether it is a dog or a tiger, lion, monkey, all these things, right? So in the same way, you can by looking at a structure of a human being also will be able to know that he recognize that he is a human being. So in the same way, uh, how a C program looks like. So what will be at the top? Just like for human being, at the top he has a head. Right? Below that head he has neck. Below the neck he has shoulders and body. Then below the body you have legs, two legs. Right? So this is the structure of a human being. Similarly, what will be the structure of a C program? So what will be at the top? What will be at the bottom? What will be in between? So that you are going to see, or you can understand with the help of this structure of a C program. Right? So, so at the top, so I'll give the numbering for this levels. So what will be at the top? That I'll mention it as number one position. Then below that, what will be there? I'll position it as second. Then below that, three, and below that, four, five, six, so on like that, right? So, so beginning with the first section, top section, what we'll have is we'll have a something called documentation section at the beginning of your program. And let me mention that uh, it is optional. So you need not use this. If you use it also, nothing will happen. So that's the reason why am mentioning it here as optional. What you're going to do in this documentation section, let me tell you later. But first of all, let me list out various parts of the program or structure of a C program. Right? So after the documentation section, so you have something called section. Okay? You have something called main section, and this is also optional. Optional, but you can take it as mandatory. Third one is definition section. Definition optional. Fourth one is global declaration section. This is also optional. Fifth one comes main section. Is mandatory. The sixth one subprogram section, and this is also optional. Okay? So in that way, totally altogether, in the entire structure of this program, C program, if you divide it into multiple sections or multiple parts, you'll have totally altogether 6 sections. So out of this 6 section, at the top, in the first place, you'll have documentation section. This is optional. Then below the documentation section, you'll have link section, which is mandatory. Below that, you'll have definition section, which is an optional again. Then below that, you have global declaration section. This is also optional. And after that, you have main section, which is mandatory. And this section is nothing but the main function that we write in our C program. Void main, you'll be writing brace and close. So this is called as a main section. And below this main section, you'll have a subprogram section. That means apart from the main function, if you want to create any other functions, you can create those functions below this main function, right? And this is also optional. If you want, you can write. Otherwise, you can write. Right? So out of all these 6 sections in the structure of a C program, the second and the fifth section, both these sections are mandatory. The remaining sections are optional. Okay. So that's why you'll be finding these 2 sections in every program. For example, you're going to write hash include stdio.h. So this will come under what section? Link section. So how many header files you're going to mention? Hash include stdio.h, hash include con.h, hash include string.h, math.h. All these things are nothing but uh, link section. They come under link section. And after this only you'll write main section, right? So you write the main function. This will form the main section. So both these two are mandatory. The remaining sections are optional. So what do you mean by this documentation section? First, let us discuss one by one now. So coming to this documentation section, you can write comments in C either using 2 forward slashes like this or single line comment. But for multi-line comment, what you'll be using? You'll be using a forward slash asterisk, and then at the end you'll use asterisk and close the forward slash. So in between this you can write. So what this documentation section contains is it will contain like this forward slash followed by an asterisk symbol and then asterisk and followed by a forward slash. Between these two, here you can write anything, any comment related to this program. Say for example, I'm writing a program for finding or listing the prime numbers 100. So then I can write the documentation here, the following uh, program computes, displays all the prime numbers a given number n, right? Where n is given, where n is given by the user as input in the console. Right? So this is a program that I'm going to write. For example, say. So in that case, Any person who opens this program, when he looks at this documentation section, even though he doesn't understand the program that is written below it completely, by looking at this documentation section, he'll understand that this program is going to do this thing. So you can mention everything step by step. You can mention what you have done in the program, right? So just like for a building or a property, you have a documentation document where it is mentioned, where it will be mentioned like so and so person owns this so much of square meters of area or square meters of place falling under so and so jurisdiction. So that way you'll have a documentation. Right? In the same way, for this program also you can have a documentation, and this is not mandatory. You can use it or you cannot. You need not, may or may not use it. నువ్వు రాయాల్సిన అవసరం లేదు, కంపల్సరీగా రాయాలని ఏం లేదు. మీకు అవసరం అనుకుంటే రాయొచ్చు. సో యూ కెన్ రైట్ దట్ ఇఫ్ ఎట్ ఆల్ ఇఫ్ యూ వాంట్ యూ హ్యావ్ టు రైట్ దిస్, రైట్? సో దిస్ ఈస్ documentation section. So that's why I mentioned it as optional. Then after that you have a link section, which is this one, right? Then below this link section, so why I'm calling this link section means actually this stdio.h is nothing but a header file. What is this stdio.h is a header file. So what is this header file means? When you install any C compiler on your computer, your compiler will have some set of predefined functions. Like we are defining the code for the main function in our program. So the same way, there will be some other functions which are already created. Printf, scanf, all these things are examples of predefined functions. Just like main function, printf and scanf are also functions. But the difference between the main and the printf, scanf functions are printf, scanf functions are already created and they are available in the C library. And where is that library means? Along with your C software that you install on your computer, you'll have something called library. You can also call it as a API, application program interface. Okay, so you will have that library, and that library will consist of nothing but header files, right? So you may have some many predefined functions. Instead of putting all the predefined functions in a single place, uh, they are classified into different categories. All the predefined functions related to mathematical operations are put under one header file called math.h header file. Similarly, all the standard input and output functions, like standard input and output means standard input device is keyboard, standard output device is monitor. So anything, any functions which work with those monitors and the keyboards, uh, they are called as standard input output functions. So such functions are put under another file called standard input output header file. So this stdio.h means standard input output header file, right? So in that way, you'll have many header files, and each header file will contain some related functions, predefined functions. So because they are not part of your program, they are available in the C software's library. If at all, if you want to use those functions and call them in your program, then first you have to establish a link between your program and the header files in the library, right? So how to establish a link between your program and that header files in the library is, first of all, you need to know which header file you want to use, right? So after knowing that header file, you have to write a statement like this: hash followed by a directive. This is called as a directive. Include, the keyword include is a keyword in C language. Uh, and after that, you have to use open an angular bracket and close an angular bracket. This less than symbol is called as an opening angular bracket, and greater than symbol is called as a closing angular bracket. In between these opening and closing angular brackets, you need to mention the name of the header file, right? So when you write this statement like this, what will happen is your program will now be linked with the library header file called standard input output header. So from your main function, now you can utilize the services. You can call the all the functions that are defined in this stdio dot, right? So any function whose code inside it is designed by the programmer himself at the time of writing the program is said to be a user defined function. But if a function's code is already defined and available in the library, then we call it as a predefined function or library function, right? So we'll discuss about this again. So this section is called as link section. So now we completed documentation section and link section. And then after this link section, you may or may not use another one called hash define like this. Hash define, say pi space 3.1. So these are called as this section is called as, instead of include, you write hash define. Then this is called as definition section. This part is called as definition section. In this definition section, you can define some macros. You will not understand what is a macro now. Later you can understand. It is an advanced concept in C language. So let us not discuss that advanced concept now itself because you are now learning fundamentals. So imagine this pi is it is actually a macro, but you can consider it as a constant because uh, we are going to use a constant value called 3.14 in finding um, area of a circle or a circumference of a circle like pi r square and 2 pi r, right? So instead of using that pi symbol, because we cannot use that pi symbol in our C program, we can define a constant like this. You can give any name for that. I'm giving pi. If you want, you can give only p also, or you can give a also. So when you define like this, after writing hash define, give a space and give some constant name. Any name you can give, you can use for it, and give a space and what value you want to give to that variable, that constant. You can mention that value like this here. So now what will happen is when you run your program and when you compile your program, wherever in the program you use this constant pi, that will be substituted automatically with the value 3.14. So that is the purpose of this hash define statement. So if you write such statements are called as definition statements. So you can write one or more definition statements here as per your requirement. మన అవసరాన్ని బట్టి ఒకటి కానీ రెండు కానీ ఎన్నైనా hash defined statements రాసుకోవచ్చు. So all those one or two hash defined statements together, they'll form the third section, that is definition section, and this is optional. మనకు అవసరమైతే యూజ్ చేస్తాం, లేకపోతే లేదు. So it is not mandatory, but this is mandatory stdio.h. Why? Because in a simple program at least you will be using at least one printf function or a scanf function. If you want to use both these printf and scanf, this is mandatory because we have to establish a link between the standard input output header file in the library with our program. Without linking that, we cannot use printf and scanf functions in our program. So this is mandatory. But coming to this one, this is optional. Okay. So now that we have completed three sections, first three sections, then global declaration section. So in this global declaration section, either you will define variables, you will declare variables, or you will declare functions, right? So in the global declaration section, what we'll do is, so I'll mention here in the global declaration section, we declare global variables and functions, right? So this is optional. So what do you mean by global variable declaration? If you declare any variable like this above the main function int a like this, a comma b like this, then these variables a b are called as global variables. Similarly, you may declare a function also. A function will be declared like say int factorial like this. You can declare a function. So this is called as a function declaration, and this is variable declaration. So if you either declare variables or functions like this above the main function in this plot, then this is called as global declaration. and this is also optional. You need not use it compulsorily in your program. If you want, you will use it. Otherwise, you will not use it. Say, for example, you are not creating any other functions other than the main function. Then will you declare this function? Will not declare this function. If you are not using any other functions, then there is no need of this global variable. You can declare the variables inside the main function like this. A comma. So this is local declaration. If you declare any variable inside the function definition like this, after the brace is open, within the braces, if you declare any variable, that will be considered as local variable. And if you declare variables here, they are called as global variables. That's why I mentioned in the global declaration section, we declare global variables and functions, right? So this is the fourth section, and this is also an optional section here, right? Then comes the next section, the main section, which is mandatory. So the main function that you define like this is called as the main section. Okay, and then below that you'll have a any other function definition. Say for example, I declared here in factorial int n like this, right? So for that you can give the definition for that function here like this. Open brace and close brace and give the definition for that function. Now this will constitute what? Subprogram section. So this is main section. This is subprogram section. Okay. And this part is global declaration. And this is definition section. This is a link section. This one is documentation. So that way, all these 6 sections will be existing in your program. But out of all these 6 sections, only 2 are mandatory, right? So if there is no documentation section, then you will find this statement as the first part of your program, at the first line of the program, right? Then if this is not there, if both these are not there because they are optional things, then after these, after include stdio.h, what will be there? Void main, right? So that is the reason why you find only these two, hash include stdio.h and void main in most of the simple programs that we write in C language, right? So this is structure of a C program. So you have any doubts, you can ask Nitin.
Nothing, sir.
Okay, right. So now let us go ahead and write a simple C program. First, I'll write it in the notepad and then copy and paste it somewhere. Dev C++ and use the Dev C++ compiler, so that can be used for compiling both C as well as C++ programs. Okay. So now, how to write a C program? Now that you know the structure of a C program, let us begin writing a C program. Simple sum of two numbers I'm going to write, for example. So first, now structure of a C program. What will be their documentation section? So how will the documentation section? So we have to we have to start the forward slash and then followed by an asterisk symbol. Then again asterisk and forward slash. Between this, following program I'm going to write like this. Program takes as input two integer values, keyboard, computes of those integers and display result. Right? So this is what I'm writing. as a documentation section for my simple C program. Then after this, what will be there after this documentation section? You'll have the link section, right? So what I have to write here in the link section, hash include stdio.h I'm writing. As I told you earlier, is a header file. Header file is contained inside the library of C programming, right? So we call that library as a standard C library. So that C library contains many header files, and among those many header files, one of the header file is stdio. So this stdio.h header file contains all the functions like printf, scanf, all these things. So let me tell you about this printf and scanf first. So printf is a predefined function which is used to display some message on the screen. When you execute the program, whenever that particular line of statement gets executed, then what will happen is uh, something or whatever you display, whatever you write within the parenthesis, within the double quote, that will be displayed on the screen as it is, right? So we call that printf statement or printf function as an output function because it is going to display something on the output device, monitor or screen. That's the reason why we call it as an output statement or output function. Coming to the scanf function, we call it as an input statement or input function because the scanf function is going to work along with the keyboard, and whatever input value you enter from the keyboard, that value will be received by the scanf function, and it will store that value in a some place in the memory, right? So uh, we have the scanf and printf functions in the which library, in C's library, in which header file they are available, stdio.h, right? So what does stdio.h mean? I'll mention here in the comment. So I can use comment anywhere in my program. So I'll write a comment here. stdio.h stands for standard output header file, right? So the meaning of stdio.h is standard input output header file. So in stdio stands for standard input output. Dot h, why I'm giving dot h is it means that this is a file, just like a C program file or a Word document or a PDF document, which we call it as a file. The extension of that file is, if it is a PDF document, what is the extension, file extension of that PDF file is .pdf. If it is a Word document, then file extension for the Word document will be .docx, right? Similarly, if it is a C file, then you will have a .c extension. If it is a Java file, you will have a .java extension, right? So similarly, this is a header file. So a header file has an extension .h. So you need to mention the name of the file stdio followed by .h, which means that the file is which type of file? It is a header file, right? So you have to mention that header file within the Angular brackets, right? And there must not be any space between hash and include and this stdio. You can have a space between include and stdio.h, but there must not be space between hash and include. Okay, so this is uh, stdio.h header file. So basically, when you are writing a simple program, you will be using only this one because at least any single simple program will at least use one printf statement. If not scanf statement, at least we will write a printf statement. So don't get confused between a printf statement and printf function. Printf is actually a function, but uh, we have to call that function by writing a statement in our program. Okay, I told you yesterday in the previous class, right? What is calling or invoking a function? So by writing that statement in our program, printf within the parenthesis something ending with a semicolon, we are doing nothing but we are making a call or we are invoking that function printf, is available in stdio.html. Okay, so now that you understood this one, uh, as I told you in the previous class in fundamentals, anything you want to write, any piece of code that you want to write in your program, you must put that piece of code inside a function. And in a simple C program, the only function that will be available is the main function. So I'll write here void main. So let us discuss about what is this void uh, later. I'll discuss about this all these things later. For now, you consider this void as nothing but return type. We call it as return type. Right? I'll write here in comment where void return type of main function. So this is the name of the function. Main is the name of the function. Every function will have a parenthesis opened and closed, and these parentheses will be either empty or you'll have some parameters. Some you may have like int x comma int y like this, right? You might have found these things. Right? These are nothing but called as parameters. The main does not have any parameters, so that's the reason we store it with an empty parenthesis. We write it with an empty parenthesis. And what do you write here? This is called whatever you write here. And how many lines of code you write here? That entire lines of code is called as body of main function. Right? So we write the n number of statements, n number of lines of code within this. So when you write a program like this, when you run this program, automatically how many lines of program you have written, all those many lines of code will be executed in whichever order you have written. Not all the statements will be executed at a single go. Statements will be executed one line after the other, one statement after the other. So if there are 10 statements in your function, and when your function begins execution, the first statement gets executed first, then the second statement, then the third statement, so on up to the last statement. Once the last statement is completed, your program will terminate because there are no more uh, instructions or statements to execute. So we say the program has been terminated. Okay. So a function will look like this. A function will have a return type. It will have a it will have a name for it, and it will have a parenthesis opened and closed, and within the parenthesis you may or may not have the parameters, and then a brace will be opened and some lines of code will be written like this, and then a brace will be closed. So this is how a function is defined. So this is called as the definition of the function, right? So but coming to these functions, actually they have three aspects. Functions have three aspects. The first aspect is declaration. Second aspect is, let me mention here, functions normally have three aspects. So what are those three aspects means? First one is function declaration. And second one is function definition. Okay? And third one is function calling. Right? So all these three are mandatory for any function except for main function. Okay, the exception is main function. Uh, the main function has only the definition. It will not have declaration. It will not have calling. It may have calling, but it is useless calling it. So generally, we use only this function definition for the main function. So the syntax for main function will look like this. Syntax for main function will look like this. So if we want, I'll write the syntaxes for these functions. So let me give the syntaxes for the syntax for function declaration. The function will have a return type, as I mentioned, followed by space and function name, then parameters, parameter list will be there, and ending with a semicolon. So this is the syntax for function declaration. So every function will be declared like this. So this is return type, then this is function name, and this is parameter list. So if there are no parameters, then this will be empty. Parentheses will be empty. For main function, you can see the parentheses are empty, right? Return type for the main function is mentioned as void, right? Name of the function is main, but there will not be any brace opened and closed for declaration. Similarly, coming to function definition syntax, let me change this to declaration. This is function definitions syntax I'm giving now. This will also have same return type. I'll copy this. Most it will be same, but at the end you will not have a semicolon. You have to remove the semicolon. Then you will have a brace open and brace closed. And within the brace, you have some set of statements. We call it as body of the function. It is nothing but body of the function. So why I'm using this one? Because to ignore this line, this is considered as comment. Okay. So this is the syntax for function definition. So if you look at the main function, return type is void, name of the function is main, and parenthesis is open, parenthesis is closed. Between the parentheses, you don't have any parameter list, right? If this function does not have parameters, then it will be empty. If there are parameters, they will be mentioned along with their data types, each separated with a comma. So after the parenthesis is closed, then the next line open the brace and write some set of statements which we call it as body of the function. Then after the statements are over, close the brace. So that is how this looks like, right? So now this is nothing but syntax. So as I told you earlier, what is the syntax in programming language? Syntax is nothing but how the structure of a particular entity looks like. So when now we are talking about which entity, a function. So how a function definition looks like is, it looks like this. The structure of the function definition looks like this. This is, we have return type. In our example, the return type is void, then followed by a space and then name for the function, which is nothing but main in our example case. And then parenthesis will be opened and closed, and in between the parenthesis you will have parameter list. If there is a parameter, then this will not be empty. If there are no parameters, it will be empty like this. Main function does not have any parameters, so we'll open it and immediately close the parenthesis. So after that, brace is open. Similarly, here also brace is open. Then at the end, brace is closed. Here also brace is closed. Then you write some set of statements here. Each statement ending with a semicolon, which is nothing but totally together. All the statements together, we call it as body of the function. Okay. So this is the syntax for function definition. Then coming to function call, syntax for function calling. So syntax for function calling will be simply function name, open and close the parenthesis, ending with a semicolon, and here in between the parentheses you'll have parameter list. At all, if that function does not have any parameter list, then here also you'll have an empty parenthesis. Nothing will be right. So this is the syntax for function call. So in this way, every function that we create in our program will have this syntax, these three aspects. What are those three aspects? Function declaration, function definition, function call. But there is an exception for one function in our program, and that function is nothing but the main function. Main function has only one aspect, that is function definition. It will not have declaration and it will not have calling. It will only have definition. So that's why in our program, when we write any simple program, there will be only one function called main function. That main function will be written like this, and that part is nothing but called as definition of the function. Okay, so it will not have declaration and calling. It will only have definition. So now that if you understand this, now we'll before starting to write a program, uh, or if I, for example, I'll write a simple program and explain you. Then after that, we are going to discuss about some basic things about C program, that is variables, data types, all these things we need to discuss, constants and all, right? So what are variables in a program? Variables are nothing but they are references to the data stored in your computer's memory. So when you write a program, every program that you write will receive some input data and generate some output data, right? So you know that very well. Every program receives some input and gives us back some output. So what do you mean by this input? Input is nothing but some data, and that data can be in different formats or different types. So you may give an integer data, or you may give a floating point data, you may give a string data, you may give a character data, right? So that way you can give the data as input in different formats. So what are these formats means? If you are asked to enter marks you obtained in a particular subject, so your marks will be an integer value. That means your marks will be 60, 70 like this. It will not be like 60.5, right? So if at all if you get that 60.5 marks, then they will be rounded to 61, right? So you can imagine that it is a integer value. So any numerical value that does not have a decimal point is nothing but an integer value. So you can give an integer value as an input, or a floating point value as an input, or a character value as an input, or a string value as input to your program. So whatever you give, after performing some operations or computations on the data, again your computer will display on the screen some output back to you after the program is executed. So that output also may be in different formats. It may be a numerical value, and when you say numerical value, it can be either an integer value or a floating point value, or it may be a string or a character, non-numerical value, right? So uh, every program will receive inputs, data, data as input. So how that data is stored in your memory, and how will you refer to that data in the memory that is stored in the memory in your program? So instead of directly referring to that memory location, every memory location will have an address. Just like every house in this city or a town has an address like a house number, street number, colony, and then locality, district, and all these things, right? So you will have an address. So similarly, the computer's memory has something called locations, just like houses. You'll have something called location, memory location, and in that memory location, this data will be stored. So, what if you want to refer to a particular value, if you want to access a particular value in your program, which is stored in your computer, then what we need to do, we don't know what is the address of that memory location. So instead of knowing the address of that memory location, we'll use something called variables, or we'll give a name to that location. So that names are nothing but variables, right? So these variables are going to store nothing but data. Instead of saying memory is going to store data, we are going to say variables are going to store data. So in our program, instead of using the memory location name, we are going to use the variable names, right? So because these variables are going to store some data, and this data can be in different formats. So we have something called data types to specify what type of data is stored in a variable. Okay. So we have something called data types. So you need to know about these variables and data types first before you start writing a C program. Okay. So by definition, variable can be defined as uh, any value that varies or changes what anything is saying. Both are same. Right? So when I say a value, it is nothing but a data, right? And what do you mean by data type? A data type specifies what type of a value is stored in it. So how will you specify the type of the data type of a variable means? Then we have discussed another topic called keywords. Okay, fine. So we'll be using some keywords like int, float, double, char, per, if all these are called as keywords in C. What are these keywords? Let me tell you about this keyword. So to understand all these things, we need to know something called tokens in C programming. So tokens are nothing but smallest individual units in a C program, right? So let me delete this all variable, all these keywords. So we have something called C token. What are tokens means? Smallest individual unit of a program is called as a token. So what is it? What is a smallest individual unit? For example, you write a simple English sentence, natural language, or any other language, right? For a while, let us forget about the programming language. Let us come back to this programming language concept a little while later. Now we'll have a general discussion. So if you write a paragraph of text in a English language, so that paragraph consists of what? Sentences, right? And you know how the sentences are separated in a paragraph? After a sentence is completed, we'll use a full stop, right? And after full stop, again, you will start a new sentence. And when you start a new sentence, the sentence will begin with the a first word with a capital letter, right? First word in the next sentence will begin with a capital letter, right? So in that way, each sentence is separated by a comma, and in each sentence there will be multiple words. There will be multiple words, right? So words can be of different length. Each word may not will not have same number of characters used, right? So if you take the, how many letters are there in that? Or if you take this word token, how many letters are there in this word token? Five letters are there. D, O, K, E, and N. In that way, you have five letters in this word. And when you take this word A, it has only one letter. And when you take this word called, it has how many letters? Six letters. C, A, L, L, E, D. Right? Now, if I consider this sentence here, if, for example, let us consider this as a sentence in natural English language. Right? So, how is this sentence composed? This is the smallest individual character. Each alphabet that we use that sentence is nothing but considered as a smallest individual unit. So your paragraph or sentences are composed of individual unit. If you divide them entirely into small parts, each part is nothing but one letter. It can be any letter from A to Z, either in uppercase or lowercase, right? సో అంటే క్యాపిటల్ లెటర్ అయి ఉండొచ్చు, స్మాల్ లెటర్ అయి ఉండొచ్చు. అంటే చిన్న ఒక ప్రతి లెటర్ మనం రాసే సెంటెన్స్ లో వాడే ప్రతి లెటర్ కూడా ఒక స్మాల్ ఇండివిజువల్ యూనిట్ లాంటిది, right? So how a letter in a sentence or a paragraph in a natural language is called as a smallest individual unit. Even tokens in C program are also like that only. See, so the smallest individual unit in a C program is said to be a token. So if you write a program like this void main, void is one token, right? Function name is one token. Opening parenthesis is another token. Closing parenthesis is another token. Opening brace is another token. Closing brace is another token. Semicolon is a token, right? Name of the variable is a token. And before the name variable name, we use the keyword like int, float to declare that variable. So that int, float are also nothing but tokens, right? So as such, everything, every small individual unit of your program that you write in C programming is said to be a token. So now we can classify these tokens into different types, right? So keywords are tokens. So for example, the return type that we used here in main function, void. So void is a keyword. So keyword is one type of token. Uh, Special symbols that we use in our program are tokens. Special symbols in the sense we use some um, semicolons, exclamatory marks, or we use double quotes, single quotes, comma, ampersand. All these things we are going to use. Asterisk. All the symbols are nothing but special symbols, right? So our program will contain keywords. It will contain special symbols. It will contain operators, right? It contain operators. And what does it contain? Still identifiers. What do you mean by identifiers? Is any name you give to either a variable or a function or an array. Program లో arrays create చేస్తాం, variables create చేస్తాం, right? We create variables, we create arrays, we create functions. For all these things, we will give some name. Certain name is given, right? So those names are nothing but we call them as identifiers. Why the term identifiers means? Identify means what? Identify something. So the name of a variable will identify that it is a variable. The name of a function will identify that it is a function, right? So to identify a function in your program, you'll identify it by using its name. To identify a variable in your program, you'll identify it using a name for that variable. Similarly, name of an array is also an identifier. So in that way, we call all the names given to the variables, functions, arrays, structures, unions that we create. All these are called as identifiers. Okay. So identifiers are also tokens. So anything else, we also use something called literals, right? So what do you mean by literals? At times in your program, you will be writing statements like a is equal to 10 like this, right? So here a is nothing but a variable, and the name of that variable is a, so it will come under identifiers, right? And this equal to symbol, which is called as an assignment operator, this comes under operators. And this 10 is nothing but a literal, nothing but a literal. A statement like this, char a is equal to single quote, you write something, say x like this, and end it with a semicolon. So you must have found such statements in C program. So in the C program, char is nothing but a keyword, the keyword, and a is nothing but a name of a variable. So another identifier, and this equal comes under operators. And now the single quotes under special symbols, quotas. This is nothing literal. This is a arbitrary constant. It is also integer value. X is a character. This X is also a literal. The example of 5 is literals. So all the tokens, all these keywords, special symbols, operators, identifiers, literals, all these things as what tokens in just like parts of in any natural language. భాషా భాగాలు ఉంటారు తెలుగులో parts of nouns, adjectives, words, those things are not uh, parts of subject. So that parts are uh, with the tokens. Okay, so did you understand this? Hello, Nitin, are you there?
Sir, hello?
Okay, right. So now that you understood what are C tokens and what are different types of tokens, right? Keywords, special symbols, operators, identifiers, literals. Okay. So we are going to use all these things in our program. When you write a C program, you may use some of them and you may not use some of them. But definitely you'll use at least one keyword because when you bring a main function, you use a void or it is a keyword. We use special operators they may not use. If you write a print statement and display a message, then you may not use operators. But when you write some complex programs, definitely we'll be using all these keywords. So what are part of speech for natural language? Let's say tokens are for programming language. So uh, you understood, right? You have any doubts regarding this? If you have any queries and doubts, you can ask me so that we can continue writing the programs from tomorrow because all these are necessary. And I need to discuss about variables and data types also first, and then we can start writing the program. First, we'll write a simple program at least. We'll use a printf function. Let me write a program for program which will display hello world, right? So a simple program must be written like this. Main. So you know every C program contains at least one function. That is nothing but the main. There is only one function in your program that must be the main function. So here I'm going to use I'm going to display a message called hello world. Hello world. Right? So this is how you write a program. Now the main function has only one statement. So now what is this called as body of the function? Nothing but body of the function. Right? So I've mentioned in the syntax, right? So function will have a return type, function name, and within the parentheses parameter list if any. Otherwise it will be empty and open brace, close brace, and in between the braces you'll have body of the function. And this body of the function contains at least one statement. That means it may contain one statement or it will contain more than one statement. So in this simple program, it contains only one statement. So how will you know what is a statement? Every statement ends with a semicolon. So if there is something written from the beginning, after that you find a semicolon, with that the statement is over. So after the semicolon, if you write anything, that will be considered as another statement. That way, for every statement, you need to give a semicolon at the end. If you don't give a semicolon, that is nothing but violating the rule. I told you, right? Every programming language will have syntax and semantics. So you have seen some syntax now, right? And as part of semantic, semantic is nothing but a rule, right? Set of rules. So one of the rules is every statement must end with a semicolon. That is one of the semantics. Will not use the program is not using any variable data. Simply, it is making a call to the printf function. Right? And for that printf function, you are passing one parameter within the double and within the double you have to write some text and close the parentheses. And this is a predefined function, just like main function. Printf is also a function. Now what you are doing, you make a call to the printf function. But if you want to make a call to this function in your C program, because this printf is a predefined function, where is that predefined function available in a header file stdio. So before this main function in the read section, you have to write this hash, okay, the angular brackets, you have to write stdio dot hash include stdio dot h. So in this header file, we have this printf functions definition. So now if you want to make a call to the definition, you have to write a statement by using the syntax for calling a function. How do you call a function? Mention the name of the function. open the parenthesis and at the end give us the form. I have mentioned syntax calling the function name, parenthesis close, that semicolon, and within the parenthesis, if any parameters you want to pass to that function, you can pass that function parameters uh, with their data type, right? So this is a string type of value. So strings are no programming or any other programming language. Thing enclosed within a double quote is called as a string. The parameter that I'm passing to the printf function is a string parameter. Okay, so this is how a simple C program looks like, and how to write a simple C program is this one. So if you write multiple statements, whichever order you have written, in that order only will be executed. So in tomorrow's class, we are going to see uh, data types and variables, different data types and variables, and using those variables in our program. Okay. ఇప్పుడు any doubts ఏమైనా ఉన్నాయా నితిన్? Any doubts till now?
ఏం లేవు సార్.
Okay. The voice clear లేదు. I am not able to understand what you are trying to say. You can text me in the అంటే దీంట్లోనే టెక్స్ట్ చేయొచ్చు వాట్సాప్లో. కింద మీకు you have a raise your hand at the bottom left corner. You have raise hand and then logo for opening and closing chat. దాంట్లో మెసేజ్ పెట్టుకోవచ్చు ఇక్కడ. Let me show it. I hope you got it. My audio is not clear. You are not audible. What about my audio? Is it clear? Now it is clear, right? So you have any doubts, you can text there. Answer my question. Any doubts? Okay. Refer all the topics that are covered till now and recollect all those topics and remember them so that we can start continuing to write the programs from tomorrow's class. Okay, fine. So let us leave for now. Bye. You can leave. You can leave.